Hi, I'm here to show you how I do my gathered ridges ear warmers. Here are the ones that I've made for my stepdaughter. I've made several of these and they're a very fast and fun project to make. You can use any round loom to make these. This one I did with the 37 peg CinDWood 3/4 inch gauge. I'm going to now make myself a pair using my 44 peg 5/8 inch gauge. I'm using a bulky number 5 yarn. This particular yarn I'm using is the Loops and Threads Charisma yarn in the color Black Raspberry. You only need one strand. You can use, like I said, you can use a 1/2 inch gauge round loom, 5/8 inch gauge, or the 3/4 inch gauge round loom for this pattern. And the pattern for the Gathered Ridges ear warmer is available to download on CinDWood Loom's ePattern site. So if you like this video, please take a minute and download your own copy so that you have it stored for when you want to make it and you don't have computer access. And also helps me continue on being able to bring you videos like this. So the first step in the pattern is that you're going to cast on. You can either use the chain cast on or the E-wrap cast on. Personally, I like to use the chain cast on. So I'm going to start with that. You want to leave a long tail when you cast on, because you're going to be, when you're finishing, using that yarn to gather your ear warmers together. So I'm going to leave about 1.5 to 2 feet, and I just sort of eyeball it. If you want, you can use a tape measure and measure more exactly. Depending on how many times you're going to want to wrap it around at the end, you're going to want to leave a longer or smaller tail. You can always trim it if you have too much, so I always just kind of make a longer tail than I probably really need. So I'm going to start with chain cast on, and that's the first part of the pattern. And so I'm making a slip knot, and I'm placing it on peg 1. And like I said, you can also do an E-wrap cast on for this hat pattern. Or this ear warmer pattern. So to chain cast on, you're simply bringing your working yarn in front. You have your slip knot here on peg 1. And like I said, I've left a long tail. You bring your working yarn to the front of peg 2. And in between peg 2 and 1, you're going to pull back. And unfortunately, I've lost my crochet hook that I like to use. There's also a great video Amanda has done on how to do chain cast on without a crochet hook. So you continue going around, casting on your loom with your either the chain cast on or the E-wrap. If you are using the chain cast on, I do recommend you kind of keep it loose for this pattern. Depending on your loom size. I mean, it doesn't have to be too loose, but so you chain cast on your entire loom. Pick the appropriate size loom for your head. I find that the 44 5/8 inch gauge fits my head perfect. It's roughly 22 inches in circumference. I've also made these on the 55 peg 1/2 inch gauge CinDWood looms for my head, and that also fits my head. But any round loom you can make this for a smaller child or a larger adult. Any size round loom works. It doesn't have to be a certain number of pegs. It can be odd, even. It doesn't really matter. You just want to make sure that you're using an appropriate yarn for it. So I'm going to continue on, chain casting on, and then I will show you how we do the rest of the ear warmers. So I've just gotten to the last peg in the row doing my chain cast on. I'm making one more loop, and I'm going to place this last loop on peg 1. And now you're ready to begin the instruction portion of the pattern. For the ear warmers, you're going to be alternating 4 rows of purl and 3 rows of E-wrap. And you're going to end with 4 rows of purl. If you're using a fine, you're going to be doing this for a total of 26 rows. And the first row, though, before we start with the 4 rows of purl, is we're going to do a row of E-wrap. So you're going to go around your loom. Now this first peg has 2 loops on it. So you're going to wrap the first peg, and you're going to bring both of the stitches up over the top one. And then you continue on, E-wrapping around the loom. Bringing the bottom stitch up over the top. And that is row 1 of the pattern. And I like to do a few stitches of E-wrap at a time. And knit over. So you continue doing that all the way around whatever loom that you're working on for row 1, and you're just doing a row 1, and it just states EW or E-wrap. So you're going to do that all the way around, no matter what size loom you're doing. Pegs 1 through 44, 1 through 55, 1 through 60, etc. And then I will show you how to do rows. The next row 2 and row 5. Okay, we just completed row 1, and that was to E-wrap. I E-wrapped my last peg. The next portion of the pattern just states to purl, and it says rows 2 through 5, purl. And this is my pattern. It's the Gathered Ridges Ear Warmer pattern. So you're going to do 4 rows where you're going to purl every peg. And to purl, you just bring the working yarn below the stitch, bring it up through the top, take the loop that was stitched, the loop that was on the peg before, bring it back, and now you leave your new purl stitch, and that's how you purl stitch. So you're going to purl every peg around, taking your working yarn below, bringing it up, taking the loop that was on the loom before, pulling it back to the center of the loom, pulling your working yarn tight but not too tight. And you're going to be doing 4 rows where you purl every single peg around the loom. And so what I like to do is I like to have my written pattern, and once I've completed a row where it says like rows 2 through 5 purl, if I've done one row, after I finished, I'll put a tally, and then if I do row 3, so this will be 4 rows totals because it's 2, 3, 4, 5. So I just tally each time I've completed a row. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to purl around the loom, purling each peg, and then I'll join up and we'll start with row 3. Okay, I've now completed row 2, which is a row of purl, and I'm ready, and I tallied on my pattern that I've completed 1 row, and we're doing 4 rows of purl. So again, we're starting with peg 1, and we're just going to purl every peg around the loom. And that's just the start of row 3. So you continue and you purl every peg around the loom. I'm going to finish up my row of purl and I'll join you back up. Okay, I've just finished row 3, so I'm going to make another tally on my pattern that shows that I've done another row of purls. And row 4 and 5 are exactly the same. So I'm ready to start with row 4, and I'm going to simply again purl every peg around the loom. And each time I've completed, now you're going to do this for 2 more rows, rows 4 and 5. After I complete each row, I'm going to tally on my pattern when I've done 1 of the rows, and when I've got 4 marks, that means that it's time to move on to rows 6 through 8. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up rows 4 and 5, and I will join you back up and show you how I'm going to do the rows 6 through 8 where we're going to E-wrap. Okay, I've now completed 4 rows of purl, and I'm ready to begin on rows 6 through 8, which is to E-wrap. So that's 3 rows total where we're going to just simply E-wrap around the loom. And so you begin with peg 1 and you E-wrap each peg in the loom, on the loom, all the way around to complete the row, bringing your bottom stitch up over your top. And you're doing this for 3 rows. It's rows 6 through 8. You're E-wrapping each peg. After you've completed a row, you can either use a row counter. There's some free apps on phones that you can use as well, or tablets, or you can use the old pencil and paper method. And after each row where you've gone around and you've done an E-wrap, you end on this last peg, and you've done this peg as an E-wrap, you're going to tally down that you've done a row of E-wrap, or on your row counter mark that you've done an E-wrap. I'm going to go ahead and E-wrap those 3 rows, and I'll join you back. Okay, so I've just completed 3 rows of E-wrap. The next part of the pattern is to repeat rows 2 through 8 twice. Now rows 2 through 5 were to purl. So what you're going to do is you're going to do 4 more rows of purl, 3 more rows of E-wrap, and then again 4 more rows of purl and 3 more rows of E-wrap. I like to keep track on either on my paper or my pattern with tallies as I go. So now I'm going to begin, since I'm repeating rows 2 through 8 twice, I'm going to begin again, and I'm going to put a slash through. There's going to be a total repeat of each of these sections 3 times. So I'm going to put a slash, and I'm going to start tallying. Once I've completed a row of purl, I'll put a mark, and I'm going to do 4 rows of purl just like before. Then after I've completed the 4 rows of purls, I'm going to go 3 rows of E-wrap. So this is for rows 9 through 22, and all I do is I just keep marking on my paper as I complete a row. So I'm beginning rows 2 through 8 for the first time, since the pattern calls to do it twice. So again, just like I showed you before, to do a row, you just do a row of purl. You're starting with peg 1, and you're purling each peg on your loom as you go around to complete the row. Once you have gotten every purl peg and you've purled the last peg, you're going to want to tally that you've done a row, or use your row marker to do a row. Then you do it again, another purl row, and you do a total of 4 rows total of purling each row, tallying after each one. I'm going to go ahead and purl those 4 rows, and then I'll show you, and then I'll join up with you when I'm starting on my repeat of rows 6 through 8. Okay, I've now completed rows 2 through 5, which is 4 rows of purl, a second, or one time, so it's a total of twice. So I have here on my patterns the first 4, and now I'm marking down that I finished my last 4, and I'm going to repeat rows 6 through 8 again. And rows 6 through 8, you do just like you did before, and you do an E-wrap. So you E-wrap each peg as you go around the loom, starting with peg 1, working however many pegs that you have for your loom that you're using. I'm using 44, so I'm going to E-wrap pegs 1 through 44. And once I've completed a row of E-wrap, I'm going to tally on my paper or my pattern that I've done a row, and I want to make sure that I do 3 rows of E-wrap now. And as you can see, the earwormers are coming along. You have your rows of purl, E-wrap, purl, and now we're starting on another row set of 3 rows of E-wrap. I'm going to continue on doing my 3 rows of E-wrap, and I'll join you back up and we'll do our last set of repeats of rows 2 through 8, and then we'll do our bind off. Okay, I've just completed rows 6 through 8, a total of, so that's 3 rows of E-wrap, and I've marked it here on my paper that I've done 6 through 8 3 times. The pattern calls to repeat rows 2 through 8 twice, so I've repeated rows 2 through 8 once now. I'm going to go back and I'm going to repeat rows 2 through 8 one more time, and again rows 2 through 5, or rows 2 through 8, all it is 4 rows of purl followed by 3 rows of E-wrap. So rows 2 through 5, I'm going to be doing a row of purl again, starting with peg 1, purling every peg around the loom, and every time that I complete a row and I get back to my last peg, before I start the next row, I'm going to tally it until I have 4. I'm going to count. You can use a row counter, or like me, I just like to use pen and paper and tally. After each row, I'm going to tally it, and once I've done 4 rows of purl, I'm going to then do 3 rows of E-wrap. I'll join you back up for the last 3 rows of E-wrap, and then I'll show you how the last step of the row, or last steps of the pattern, after we do 3 rows. After we do the 3 rows of the E-wrap, we're going to do 4 more rows of the purl again and then bind off. So I I'm gonna do my rows, my 4 more rows of purl, and then I'll join up and we'll be on our last repeat of the E-wraps. Okay, I've now completed another 4 rows of purl. So the next step is to do another 3 rows of E-wrap. So I've now have, as you can see, the cast on, the row of E-wrap, 4 rows of purl, 3 rows of E-wrap, 4 rows of purl, 3 of E-wrap, and now 4 of purl. So the next step in the pattern is to repeat rows 6 through 8 again, and this is the last time that we're repeating rows 2 through 8. So we're going to do 3 rows of E-wrap, E-wrapping each pig around the loom, and marking off once we've completed a row. And you want to do 3 rows total. After you've done your 3 rows, I'll join you back up and show you the rest of the pattern. Okay, I've now just completed 3 rows of E-wrap, so that completes my repeat of rows 2 through 8 twice. So I've done rows 2 through 8 a total of 3 times. I've repeated them twice, so that's 22 rows completed. I've done 4 rows of purl, followed by 3 rows of E-wrap, 4 rows of purl, followed by 3 rows of E-wrap, 4 rows of purl, followed by 3 rows of E-wrap. Now we're getting to our last section of our gathered ridges ear warmers, and this will be rows 23 to 26. These are the last rows that you do, and that's 4 rows of purl. So again, just like we did before, you're going to purl each peg, starting with peg 1 in your row, all the way around the loom, for a total of 4 rows. Once around the loom is one row. So when you get back here, again, mark down that you've done one. When you've gotten to 4 rows of purl, it'll be then time to bind off and finish it. For the bind off, you can use either the super stretchy bind off or basic bind off. I like to use the basic bind off for this pattern myself, but it is important when you're using the basic bind off to keep the stitches very loose. So after I've done my 4 rows of purl, I will join you again and meet up, and I will show you how I do the basic bind off for the gathered ridges ear warmer using E-wrap for the knit stitches for the basic bind off, and then I'm going to show you how we take our tail end and gather it together so that it is gathered in the center. So go ahead and continue and do 4 more rows of E-wrap, and I'll join you back and we will do the bind off and the finishing. Okay, I'm now finishing up my last row of purl. I've done now 4 rows of purl. I'm purling my last pig in my row, and now I'm ready to do the bind off. And like I said, you can bind off using a basic bind off or a super stretchy bind off. I'm going to do a basic bind off, and I'll show you how I do that. There's videos that you can view that show you how to do the super stretchy bind off as well. I just prefer with this pattern, it seems to match better with the cast on. The only thing, the basic bind off, the only thing that you want to keep in mind is to keep your E-wrap stitches very loose when you're binding off, or that can become very tight. So the first step to binding off is to E-wrap pegs 1 and 2 in your row. And I'm keeping them very loose. After you've E-wrapped pegs 1 and 2, you bring the peg from 2 to peg 1 and then knit over that peg. Now you're going to move this stitch that's on peg 1 to your empty peg on peg 2, and you're going to E-wrap the next peg over. Again, keep these loose. You've E-wrapped peg 3, you move it over to peg 2, and knit over, leaving one stitch on the peg. You then move that stitch again over, now to the empty peg 3. E-wrap the next peg, which is going to be peg 4. Once you've E-wrapped peg 4, you move that peg, that stitch over to peg 3, knit over, move the stitch that's on peg 3 to empty peg 4. As you can see now, I've got 3 empty pegs, and I'm starting to get a nice braided edge for my ear warmers that matches very well for the chain cast on that I used. So you continue around the loom, E-wrapping each peg next to it, keeping them loose. And sometimes I just even, tug on it a little bit to make sure they are loose. Bringing it over to the next peg, knitting over, moving that stitch over to your empty peg. And this is the basic bind off, and you just continue doing the same thing, E-wrapping the peg next to the one you've just moved over, moving the stitch over to the next peg over, knitting over, and moving that new stitch over to the empty peg. So continue on doing that until you have one stitch remaining on your loom, and I'll join you back to show you how we then finish off and gather the ear warmers together. Okay, I'm now back. I have 2 stitches still remaining. I've cast off using the basic bind off all the other ones. So the last 2 I'm going to E-wrap the last one, bring it over, again move it over to the peg. And there's just this one peg that remains, knit over. Now what I do again is I go ahead and E-wrap that peg one more time, knit over, and then I cut my working yarn, leaving enough room to weave in any ends. Now if you didn't leave a tail to cast on that was long enough, or that you liked, like if you're using color like I am, here, like I left a long tail, now that I'm looking at it, I'm thinking that I'm going to, instead of using this gray and pink yarn that I have left over. I'm thinking because it ended with the black, and there's a nice distinct black, pink, I'm thinking I'm going to leave a long tail now instead and use that to gather my ear warmers. You can use either end. So that's why I like to, if I'm using the colored longs, leave a long tail to start, because that way if I wanted to use this tail end I could, because you kind of never really know how it's going to end up. So I'm going to leave about the same amount that I left for my cast on tail, and thankfully I have enough, and just cut to make sure that I have enough to wrap around. And then I'm going to finish binding off, bring the cut working yarn up through the tail like you'd be doing a purl, but don't remove any stitches. Pull the tail end up through, and now you have the tail end there. And now you can go ahead, take that last stitch off the loom, and pull tight. Now, since I've decided I'm not going to use you can either, what you want to do next is you're going to gather and cinch together the ear warmers using either your tail end from when you cast on or from when you cast off. I'm going to use my cast off tail end because I personally like how the black looks. So I'm going to take if you wanted to use your starting tail end you can do it either way, it's the same. You thread your yarn into your tapestry needle. Leaving a bit of a tail. You don't need too much. And since it doesn't really quite line up, I'm going to just kind of eyeball where my cast on started. Weave it through there. And it doesn't have to be perfect because, like I said, we're going to be wrapping this around. And you want it to kind of be in line with your starting, either your bind off or your cast off tail ends. So what I do then is I just run my yarn through a couple of the purl stitches, going just straighten a row, and I do about like 2 from each set. And you want to try to keep it kind of straight. It doesn't need to be an exact science. And then just pull through. And this is the front of your ear warmers. And then you just sort of cinch. And now all you do is you bring your yarn from the back side after you've cinched. Now here I have my tail end from my cast on. And you can cinch it and wrap it tighter or looser. And you just keep working. And just sort of lay it so that it lines up, or so that it lays like you want it to look. And then you can wrap it however many times you want. And I just sort of just keep going back and forth from each side. And you just sort of keep wrapping around until it's, and like I said, depending on how gathered you want it, you can do it, or you wouldn't have to gather it all, you could just leave it like it was. But you can wrap as many times as you want to, just sort of trying to keep it at the same tension. And I think I'm gonna stop right there. I personally like, this is for me, and I like where it's at right now. So I'm ending with it coming to the back. I'm gonna flip it inside out. And now to finish it, I have my tail end still here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run my tapestry needle through the stitches that I wrapped around. What did I got stuck on something here? Oh, I've got a knot in my yarn, that's why. Not a big deal. Then I'm going to go back to the front and just make sure that it's laying where I want it to. And then wrap it through one more time, and if you want, you can just snag a couple of the, it's hard to see, but if you go underneath to help secure, you can run your yarn through some of the stitches that are below. It's not going to notice, you're not going to notice because this is here, so that helps secure it as well. And then I usually just, and there's that knot again getting stuck. Okay. And after I've done it about twice, I just bring my working yarn up through this loop here. And pull tight. Then I'll run it back through the other way. Like I said, you just, the main thing is you don't want it to be like a big knot because that's going to be against your forehead. And then with my cast on yarn, I know a lot of people say not to do knots, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to knot the two ends together from my tail end that I cast on. The knot I like to use, I just go like this. I have both of my yarn tails. I cross them over. Bring that one over. Yep. Cross them over. Bring that one over. Bring that one over. And then pull tight. If you prefer not to knot, you can just weave them in. I find that this knot is very secure though. And then all I do is I trim my excess yarn. And that little knot can go right underneath. And now you have your completed gathered ridges ear warmers. You can wear them. You can kind of always too just adjust, you know, how you like that wrap in the middle by pulling on the ends. It's a very stretchy ear warmer, so and like I said, this works on any round loom. Finished measurements for this one using the 44 peg loom. I have about 4 inches by about 9.5 flat, but the stitches and the yarn are very stretchy, as you can see here, so will fit a wide variety of heads, sizes. Thanks for joining me. I hope you found this helpful. Have a great day. I look forward to seeing some wonderful gathered ridges ear warmers that you all make.